Welcome, my dear friends. If you want to watch super hit movie Eyes Wide Shut in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Eyes Wide Shut. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star-cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you, friends, to watch this video till the end. So let's start the video. Eyes Wide Shut is a 1999 erotic drama film directed, produced, and co-written by Stanley Kubrick. It is based on the 1926 novella Dream Story by Arthur Schnitzler, transferring the story's setting from early 20th century Vienna to 1990s New York City. The plot centers on a doctor who is shocked when his wife reveals that she had contemplated cheating on him the previous summer. He then embarks on a night-long adventure during which he infiltrates a masked orgy of a secret society. Kubrick obtained the filming rights for Dream Story in the 1960s, considering it a perfect text for a film adaptation about sexual relations. He revived the project in the 1990s when he hired writer Frederick Raphael to help him with the adaptation. The film, which was mostly shot in England, apart from some exterior establishing shots, includes a detailed recreation of exterior Greenwich Village street scenes made at Pinewood Studios. The film's production, at 400 days, holds the Guinness World Record for the longest continuous film shoot. Kubrick died of a heart attack 6 days after showing the final cut of Eyes Wide Shut to Warner Bros., making it the final film he directed. In order to ensure a theatrical R rating in the United States, Warner Bros. Digitally altered several sexually explicit scenes during post-production. This version was premiered on July 13, 1999, before being released on July 16, to generally positive but polarized reviews from critics, although its reception has improved over time. Box office receipts for the film worldwide were about $162 million, making it Kubrick's highest-grossing film in unadjusted dollars. The uncut version has since been released in DVD, HD DVD, and Blu-ray disc formats. Plot: Dr. William Bill Harford and his wife Alice live in New York City with their daughter Helena. At a Christmas party hosted by Bill's patient, Victor Ziegler, Bill reconnects with his former medical school classmate, Nick Nightingale, now a professional pianist. Meanwhile, an older Hungarian guest attempts to seduce Alice, while two young models try to seduce Bill. Victor interrupts Bill's flirtation to handle an emergency involving Mandy, a young woman who overdosed during sex with him. Bill helps stabilize Mandy. The following night, Bill and Alice smoke marijuana and discuss their unfulfilled desires. Bill dismisses the idea of Alice being unfaithful, believing women to be naturally loyal. However, Alice shocks him by confessing to fantasizing about a naval officer she observed while on vacation, even considering leaving Bill and Helena for him. Disturbed, Bill is called to a patient's home, where the patient's daughter Marion confesses her love and tries to seduce him. Bill resists and leaves. Wandering the city, Bill meets a prostitute named Domino. Before anything happens, Alice calls, prompting Bill to leave after paying Domino without proceeding further. Later, Bill encounters Nick at a jazz club. Nick tells Bill about a secretive gig at 2 a.m. where he will play piano blindfolded and reveals the password to gain entry. Intrigued, Bill visits a costume store, formerly owned by one of his patients, but now run by Mr. Milich, to rent an outfit. During the visit, Milich discovers his teenage daughter with two older men and locks them in a room, threatening to call the police. Bill arrives at the mansion, provides the password, and witnesses a bizarre sexual ritual. A masked woman warns him that he is in danger. He is taken to a gathering where the master of ceremonies demands a second password. Bill is exposed as an outsider. The masked woman intervenes, offering herself to save him. Bill is let go with a stern warning to remain silent. Shaken, Bill returns home to find Alice laughing in her sleep. She tearfully recounts a dream of having sex with the naval officer and many other men while mocking Bill. The next day, Bill visits Nick's hotel, but the clerk claims Nick was taken away by two threatening men. Returning the costume, Bill notices the mask is missing and learns that Milic now profits from prostituting his daughter, offering her services to Bill. Consumed by jealousy and doubt, Bill revisits the mansion but receives an envelope warning him to stay away. That evening, he tries calling Marion but hangs up when her fiancé answers. He then visits Domino's apartment only to find her roommate Sally, who informs him that Domino has tested HIV positive. As Bill leaves, a mysterious figure follows him. Later at the morgue, he identifies Mandy as the masked woman from the orgy after reading about her death from an overdose. Victor summons Bill and admits to being at the orgy. He explains that there was no second password and that Bill's exposure was deliberate. Victor insists the secret society only seeks to intimidate him into silence, but warns they are dangerous. He claims Nick has returned safely to Seattle and attributes Mandy's death to her drug addiction, dismissing foul play. Returning home, Bill finds the missing mask placed on his pillow. Breaking down in tears, he confesses everything to Alice. The next day, the couple takes Helena shopping for Christmas. Bill apologizes to Alice, who suggests they take action to repair their relationship. When he asks what she means, Alice responds with a single word, fuck. Cast: Tom Cruise as Dr. William Bill Harford, Nicole Kidman as Alice Harford, Sidney Pollack as Victor Ziegler, Marie Richardson as Marion Nathanson, Rade Sherbedjia as Mr. Milic, Todd Field as Nick Nightingale, Vanessa Shaw as Domino, Alan Cumming as hotel desk clerk, Sky Dumont as Sandor Savost, Faye Masterson as Sally, Lily Sobieski as Milic's daughter, Thomas Gibson as Carl Thomas, Madison Eganton as Helena Harford, Julian Davis as Mandy Curran, Gary Goba as naval officer, Abigail Good as mysterious woman, Kate Blanchett as mysterious woman's voice, Leon Vitali as Red Cloak production. Development: Eyes Wide Shut was developed after Stanley Kubrick read Arthur Schnitzler's dream story in 1968, when Kubrick was looking for a project to follow 2001: A Space Odyssey. Kubrick was interested in adapting the story, and with the help of journalist Jay Cox, bought the filming rights to the novel. For the following decade, Kubrick considered making the dream story adaptation a sex comedy with a wild and somber streak running through it, starring Steve Martin or Woody Allen in the main role. Kubrick also considered Tom Hanks, Bill Murray, Dustin Hoffman, Warren Beatty, Albert Brooks, Alan Alda, and Sam Shepard for the lead in the 1980s. The project was revived in 1994 when Kubrick hired Frederick Raphael to work on the script, updating the setting from early 20th century Vienna to late 20th century New York City. Kubrick invited his friend Michael Herr, who helped write Full Metal Jacket, to make revisions, but Herr declined for fear he would be underpaid and have to commit to a long production. Music: Jocelyn Pook wrote the original music for Eyes Wide Shut, but like other Kubrick movies, the film was noted for its use of classical music. The opening title music is Shostakovich's Waltz No. 2 from Suite for Variety Stage Orchestra, misidentified as Jazz Suite No. 2. One recurring piece is the second movement of György Ligeti's piano cycle, Musica Ricercata. Kubrick originally intended to feature Im Treibhaus from Wagner's Wesendonck Lieder, but the director eventually replaced it with Ligeti's piece, feeling Wagner's song was too beautiful. In the morgue scene, Franz Liszt's late solo piano piece, Nuages Gris, 1881, is heard Rex Tremende from Mozart's Requiem plays as Bill walks into the cafe and reads of Mandy's death. Pook was hired after choreographer Yolande Snaith rehearsed the masked ball orgy scene using Pook's composition Backwards Priests, which features a Romanian Orthodox divine liturgy recorded in a church in Baia Mare played backwards as a reference track. Kubrick then called the composer and asked if she had anything else weird like that song, which was reworked for the final cut of the scene with the title Masked Ball. Pook ended up composing and recording 4 pieces of music, many times based on her previous work, totaling 24 minutes. The composer's work ended up having mostly string instruments, including a viola played by Pook herself, with no brass or woodwinds, as Pook just couldn't justify these other textures, particularly as she wanted the tracks played on dialogue-heavy scenes to be subliminal, and felt such instruments would be intrusive. Another track in the orgy, Migrations, features a Tamil song sung by Manikam Yogeswaran, a Carnatic singer. The original cut featured a scriptural recitation from the Bhagavad Gita, which Pook took from a previous Yogeswaran recording. South African Hindu Mahasabha, a Hindu group, protested against the scripture being used. Warner Bros. Issued a public apology and hired the singer to record a similar track to replace the chant. The party at Ziegler's house features rearrangements of love songs such as When I Fall in Love and It Had to Be You, used in increasingly ironic ways considering how Alice and Bill flirt with other people in the scene. As Kidman was nervous about doing nude scenes, Kubrick stated she could bring her own music for the filming. When Kidman brought a Chris Isaak CD, Kubrick approved it and incorporated Isaac's song Baby Did a Bad, Bad Thing to both an early romantic embrace of Bill and Alice and the film's trailer. Release. Marketing. Warner Bros. Heavily promoted Eyes Wide Shut while following Kubrick's secrecy campaign, to the point that the film's press kits contained no production notes, not even the director's suggestions to Semmel regarding the marketing campaign, given 1 week prior to Kubrick's death. The first footage was shown to theater owners attending the 1999 Show West convention in Las Vegas. TV spots featured both Isaac and Ligaty's music from the soundtrack while revealing little about the movie's plot. The film also appeared on the cover of Time magazine and on show business programs such as Entertainment Tonight and Access Hollywood. Box office. Eyes Wide Shut opened on July 16, 1999 in the United States. The film topped the weekend box office with $21.7 million from 2,411 screens. These numbers surpassed the studio's expectations of $20 million and became both Cruise's sixth consecutive chart topper and Kubrick's highest opening weekend, as well as the highest featuring Kidman and Cruise together. Eyes Wide Shut ended up grossing a total of $55,691,208 in the U.S. The numbers put it as Kubrick's second highest grossing film in the country, behind 2001: A Space Odyssey, but both were considered a box office disappointment. Shortly after its screening at the Venice Film Festival, Eyes Wide Shut had a British premiere on September 3, 1999, at the Warner Village Cinema in Leicester Square. The film's wide opening occurred the following weekend and topped the UK charts with £1,189,672. The international performances for Eyes Wide Shut were more positive, with Kubrick's longtime assistant and brother-in-law, Jan Harlan, stating that it was badly received in the Anglo-Saxon world, but it was very well received in the Latin world and Japan. In Italy, it was a huge hit. Overseas earnings of over $105 million led to a $162,091,208 box office run worldwide, turning it into the highest-grossing Kubrick film. Review. Eyes Wide Shut. Eyes Wide Shut, now on re-release, is fascinating, flawed late Stanley Kubrick, his final film before his death in 1999 at the age of 70. It was adapted from Arthur Schnitzler's Traum novella, or Dream Story, published in 1926 and originally set in Vienna. The film is a tale of sexual obsession among modern-day Manhattan's wealthy and powerful classes, and I originally valued it for its satirical potency, formal control, and dreamlike self-possession, all of which are bound up in a certain kind of deadpan absurdity and soft porn seriousness. Tom Cruise plays Bill Harford, a well-off New York doctor with a fashionable clientele and a magnificent apartment in Central Park West, happily married to beautiful Alice, a former art gallery director, now a stay-at-home mom to their young daughter. In the book, they are Jewish, an important part of the doctor's alienation. Not here. Unsettled by each other's flirtatious behavior at a swell party given by a wealthy patient, Victor Ziegler, and by a consumption of champagne and weed, they later have a furious row in which Alice defiantly confesses her lustful thoughts for a certain other man in her past, and Bill then finds himself on a nighttime odyssey, searching for extramarital adventure and gate-crashing a sinister masked orgy, to which he gains admittance by murmuring the password Fidelio. This revival comes with a brief documentary short about the film, Never Just a Dream, with interviewees including his longtime collaborator, executive producer, and brother-in-law Jan Harlan, but not his widow Christiane, and not his most important collaborator, screenwriter Frederic Raphael. It might be time to reissue Raphael's 1999 memoir of working with Kubrick, Eyes Wide Open, in which Raphael amusingly hints that the tense mood of Cruise's cab ride out to the creepy orgy mansion was inspired by his own minicab journeys from St. Albans railway station to the famed seclusion of Kubrick's Hertfordshire country home for script discussions. The title, Eyes Wide Shut, was Kubrick's, and in my original piece, I wondered whether it related to the idea of imaginary sexual transgression being as potent as real, waking transgressions. In dreams you see and know things clearly, with your eyes wide shut. It's only now that I can see another comparison that was always under my nose. Malcolm McDowell's eyes being clipped wide open in A Clockwork Orange, being forced to watch something horrible. There are other visual echoes, such as the eerie emptiness of the elevator lobbies like those in The Shining, which are part of the film's artificiality and theatricality, mocked a little by the film's denigrators at the time, but a part of the hallucinatory effect. Then there is the party scene at the beginning, like something from The Shining, where Alice meets her predatory Hungarian suitor, Skye Dumont, who could almost be a ghost. Kubrick's use of Stravinsky's waltz from his jazz suite shows his sweet tooth for mainstream classical music themes, and his predilection for softcore female nudity is a characteristic thought a bit dated in 1999. Perhaps what we felt was contrived was that orgy scene, although it is disquieting and strange in the Hammer horror way that originally impressed me. But by 1999, Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho had upped the ante on these ideas of Manhattan superwealth and depravity, and in comparison, Eyes Wide Shut seemed a tad quaint. Yet now, in the age of Epstein, we can see that it was not so far-fetched to imagine elaborate clubs in which the rich and powerful can disport themselves and exploit the vulnerable. What comes across even more strongly about Eyes Wide Shut now is its chilling emphasis on ruling class secrecy. This film inspired Jonathan Glazer's Birth, 2004, itself underappreciated at the time. Cruise and Kidman heartfelt and fervent performances, although the flickering black and white moments showing her imagined sexual indulgence don't work. There are tears, and Cruise in particular lays himself open in that fiercely committed way that he tries everything as an actor. Did their actual marital disputes resemble what happened in this film? Maybe. They were divorced 2 years after this came out, with much gossip about whether the film had accentuated their discontents. Pollack's performance as Ziegler is thrillingly cynical and disillusioned. Unquestionably one of the most highly anticipated films of modern times due to its high-powered talent combo, protracted and secrecy-enshrouded shoot, rumored racy content, the 12-year interval since the last Stanley Kubrick picture, and the fact that it is being released posthumously, Eyes Wide Shut, may have trouble living up to all the extreme and diverse expectations viewers may have for it, as almost any picture would under the circumstances. But after all the curiosity and attendant hype wash away, what one is left with is a riveting, thematically probing, richly atmospheric, and just occasionally troublesome work, a deeply inquisitive consideration of the extent of trust and mutual knowledge possible between a man and a woman. Meticulous, deliberate, and precise picture casts a particular sort of spell, one that will likely captivate older and thoughtful audiences more than it will mainstream Tom Cruise diehards and those with short attention spans. A fast commercial start is assured in the wake of the media blitz that basically commenced with Kubrick's death in March, but measured pace and questionable appeal for under 25s spell hit rather than smash. As usual with the director, Warner Brothers can look to even bigger returns overseas. Less acerbic and, in its own tentative way, more optimistic about the human condition than any of the director's previous films, this intimately focused updating by Kubrick and Frederic Raphael of Arthur Schnitzler's beautifully observed 1926 novella Dream Story remains remarkably faithful to its source, while also trading in familiar Kubrick concerns such as paranoia, deception, the literal and figurative masks people wear, and the difficulty for even intelligent human beings to transcend the base and self-destructive impulses that drive the species. Aside from its succession of delectable individual scenes, Pic's outstanding feature is its subtle and unstressed expression of a dreamlike state, a stylistic fusion of the gritty and the fanciful that allows for reality and the imaginary to merge to such an extent that it is of no concern which is which, if indeed they are distinct. Kubrick first considered adapting Schnitzler's Freudian Vienna set tale in the late 60s, and in its sense of intellectual adventurousness and daring, as well as for its vaguely disembodied out-of-real space and time feel, Pic seems rather more like a part of that era than of today's cinema. Longtime Kubrick fans will therefore no doubt pick up on many nuances and meanings that could easily elude the masses of contempo viewers who are too young to have seen a Kubrick picture first run in a theater. Film bridges its source's early 20th century Euro setting with the modern New York locale via a lilting waltz to which the beautiful William and Alice Harford, Cruise and Nicole Kidman, dress in their opulent Central Park West apartment as they prepare for an elegant pre-Christmas party thrown by the extravagantly wealthy Victor Ziegler, Sidney Pollack. The virtuoso 18-minute party sequence, which is bathed in a warm amber glow and instantly rings with stylistic echoes of the bar scene in The Shining, serves to establish the couple's bond of fidelity in the face of ready opportunities for sexual escapades provided Bill by two flirtatious models and Alice by a persistently seductive Hungarian, the excellent Skye Dumont. While the intoxicated Alice barely fends off her charming pursuer, Bill, a medical doctor, is summoned to get Ziegler out of a jam by reviving a nude young woman who has ODD in his private quarters. This is just the first of several instances in the picture of women indulging in mind-altering substances with direct and sometimes dire consequences. The very next example serves as the trigger for the film's main trajectory and also occasions perhaps its most extraordinary scene. Under the influence of marijuana the next evening, Alice initiates a discussion of what happened at the party and becomes angry at Bill's lack of insight and honesty about sexual impulses. She then goes deeper, confessing to him the convulsive physical effect a handsome naval officer had on her during their Cape Cod vacation that summer. Nothing happened, she says, but she admits that at the mere sight of the officer, I could hardly move, and that at the slightest suggestion from him, she would have been willing to give up everything: her husband, their young daughter, her future. This virtual soliloquy reps a dream scene for an actor, and Kidman makes the most of it, reaching a career high watermark with this remarkable unveiling of a woman's innermost feelings. The revelation has a chilling effect on Bill, however, who heads out into the night to respond to a call that one of his patients has died. This marks just the beginning of a long, brooding, nocturnal journey that sees Bill, among other things, become the object of a declaration of love by the dead man's distraught daughter, Marie Richardson, go home with a hooker, Vanessa Shaw, with the evident intention of betraying his wife, and learn of an exclusive costume party from a musician friend, Todd Field, who happens to be playing at the event. Every encounter Bill has is cut short by an interruption that's both frustrating and somehow welcome. Intent upon an illicit adventure, an excited Bill awakens a costumier, Raid Sherbegia, in order to acquire the necessary cape and mask for the masquerade, then proceeds out of town to a lavish mansion where he gains entree to an anonymous, rigorously ritualized orgy that eventually places at risk his own life as well as that of a statuesque woman who steps in to save him. By this time, the film has built up an almost exalted sense of bizarre unreality in which the viewer, like Bill, cannot begin to imagine where this odyssey is leading. But the elaborate orgy set piece representing consummate decadence, which also runs 18 minutes and is set to haunting musical accompaniment devised by composer Jocelyn Pook, represents the picture's climax, and is followed by a protracted stretch of gradually lessening tension, as Bill obsessively tries to determine what happened to the woman who rescued him at the mansion. While this final hour is far from uncompelling, Alice awakens upon Bill's return to pour out the lurid details of an intensely sexual dream she's just had, and Bill revisits the prostitute's apartment only to receive sobering news, its form is more conventional than what has come before. It's also saddled with an unnecessary stalking interlude and an overlong dialogue sequence between Bill and Ziegler that is, for Kubrick, uncustomarily direct in the way it explains much of what's come before. Kubrick trimmed at least two of his pictures, 2001 and The Shining, after they opened, and were he still around to do so, it would not have been surprising for him to cut a bit of this final act material. Even though Eyes Wide Shut, like its source story, is seen from the male POV and largely concerns the obsessions, fears, and limitations of its protagonist, Pick is unique in the late director's oeuvre in that it's the women who far outshine the men. Kidman is sensational and luminous as she inhabits her character, who reps a convincing argument for the view that women are far more cognizant and expressive of their emotions than are men. When absent from the story during her husband's wanderings, numerous other actresses willingly take up the slack in a succession of brief but indelible turns, most notably the intense Richardson as the bereaved neurotic daughter, the insinuating Shaw as the inviting prosty, and Faye Masterson as the latter's upfront roommate. Where this leaves Cruise is the film's most debatable issue. At face value, the star gives a limited, emotionally constrained, eyebrow-crinkling and grimacing performance, nor is he entirely convincing as an established favorite doctor to Gotham's elite. No doubt the same complaints that were voiced about the ineffectuality of Ryan O'Neal and Barry Lyndon will be heard here about Cruise. On the other hand, it can be argued that the actor, who has none of the big Thespian demands placed upon him that the women do, despite being on screen nearly continuously, generously hands the picture over to his several outstanding female partners by allowing them to shine. While the role could have used an actor whose casual authority cloaked inner turmoil and desire, Kubrick found a way to use Cruise shrewdly, and Thesp in no way impedes the picture from the full expression of its intentions and meanings. Stylistically, the film represents an arresting mixture of imposing stateliness with a sometimes breathtaking intimacy. Kubrick's trademark tracks and Steadicam shots and magisterial use of music, 22 minutes of it by Pook, the rest resourcefully selected, coexist with deliberately and beautifully grainy images, often backed by flared source lights, that sometimes recall the Dogma 95 look of a film such as The Celebration. The opulent decor of Les Tompkins and Roy Walker's production design is geared to summon up an unconscious impression of the drama's Middle European source while still reflecting the habitats of Manhattan's upper class. Street footage reps a combination of large-scale outdoor Greenwich Village sets and effective second-unit material. As for the titillation factor, some of the dialogue is far more explicit than what's on view. Kidman has much more action with her dream officer in her husband's mind via black and white fantasy footage than she ever does with her mate. Orgy sequence features plenty of stunning nude women striding around, as well as pretty standard softcore simulations. And so the career of a great filmmaker comes to a close with a work that, while not his most startling or innovative or subversive, nonetheless sees him striking out in exciting and sometimes new directions with his stylistic confidence and boldness intact. Given that the endings to his previous films have been variously absurdist, despairing, apocalyptic, mystical, corrosive, murderous, and nihilistic, perhaps the fact that the conclusion here is at least guardedly hopeful suggests that at the end, Kubrick believed in some sort of human progress after all. Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut is like an erotic daydream about chances missed and opportunities avoided. For its hero, who spends 2 nights wandering in the sexual underworld, it's all foreplay. He never actually has sex, but he dances close and holds his hand in the flame. Why does he do this? The easy answer is that his wife has made him jealous. Another possibility is that the story she tells inflames his rather torpid imagination. The film has the structure of a thriller, with the possibility that conspiracies and murders have taken place. It also resembles a nightmare. A series of strange characters drift in and out of focus, puzzling the hero with unexplained details of their lives. The reconciliation at the end of the film is the one scene that doesn't work. A film that intrigues us because of its loose ends shouldn't try to tidy up. Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman star as Dr. Bill and Alice Harford, a married couple who move in rich Manhattan society. In a long, languorous opening sequence, they attend a society ball where a tall Hungarian, a parody of a suave seducer, tries to honey-talk Alice. Did you ever read the Latin poet Ovid on the art of love? Meanwhile, Bill gets a come-on from two aggressive women before being called to the upstairs bathroom, where Victor, Sidney Pollack, the millionaire who is giving the party, has an overdosed hooker who needs a doctor's help. At the party, Bill meets an old friend from medical school, now a pianist. The next night at home, Alice and Bill get stoned on pot, apparently very good pot considering how zonked they seem, and she describes a fantasy she had about a young naval officer she saw last summer while she and Bill were vacationing on Cape Cod. At no time was he ever out of my mind, and I thought if he wanted me, only for one night, I was ready to give up everything. There is a fight. Bill leaves the house and wanders the streets, his mind inflamed by images of Alice making love with the officer, and now begins his long adventure, which has parallels with Joyce's Ulysses in Nighttown and Scorsese's After Hours, as one sexual situation after another swims into view. The film has two running jokes, both quiet ones. Almost everyone who sees Bill, both male and female, reacts to him sexually, and he is forever identifying himself as a doctor as if to reassure himself that he exists at all. Kubrick's great achievement in the film is to find and hold an odd, unsettling, sometimes erotic tone for the Doctor's strange encounters. Shooting in a grainy, high-contrast style, using lots of backlighting, underlighting, and strong primary colors, setting the film at Christmas to take advantage of the holiday lights, he makes it all a little garish, like an urban sideshow. Dr. Bill is not really the protagonist, but the acted-upon careening from one situation to another out of his depth. Kubrick pays special attention to each individual scene. He makes a deliberate choice, I think, not to roll them together into an ongoing story, but to make each one a destination, to give each encounter the intensity of a dream in which this moment is clear, but it's hard to remember where we've come from or guess what comes next. The film pays extraordinary attention to the supporting actors, even cheating camera angles to give them the emphasis on two shots. In several scenes, Cruise is like the straight man. Sidney Pollack is the key supporting player, as a confident, sinister man of the world, living in old-style luxury, deep-voiced, experienced, decadent. Todd Field plays Nick, the society piano player who sets up Bill's visit to a secret orgy. And there is also a wonderful role for Vanessa Shaw as a hooker who picks up Dr. Bill and shares some surprisingly sweet time with him. The movie's funniest scene takes place in a hotel where Bill questions a desk clerk, played by Alan Cumming, as a cheerful queen, who makes it pretty clear he's interested. Raid Sherbegia, a gravel-voiced, bearded patriarch, plays a costume dealer who may also be retailing the favors of his young daughter. Carmela Marner is a waitress who seems to have learned her trade by watching sitcoms. And Marie Richardson is the daughter of a dead man who wants to seduce Dr. Bill almost literally on her father's deathbed. All of these scenes have their own focus and intensity. Each sequence has its own dramatic arc. They all lead up to and away from the extraordinary orgy sequence in a country estate where Dr. Bill gate crashes and wanders among scenes of Sadian sexual ritual and writhings worthy of Bosch. The masked figure who rules over the proceedings has ominous presence, as does the masked woman who warns Dr. Bill he is in danger. This sequence has hypnotic intensity. The orgy, alas, has famously undergone digital alterations to obscure some of the more energetic rumpy-pumpy, a shame. The events in question are seen at a certain distance without visible genitalia and are more atmosphere than action, but to get the R rating, the studio has had to block them with digitally generated figures, two nude women arm in arm and some cloaked men. In rough draft form, this masking evoked Austin Powers' famous genital hide-and-seek sequence. I have now seen the polished version of the technique and will say it is done well, even though it should not have been done at all. The joke is that Eyes Wide Shut is an adult film in every atom of its being. With or without those digital effects, it is inappropriate for younger viewers. It's symbolic of the moral hypocrisy of the rating system that it would force a great director to compromise his vision while by the same process making his adult film more accessible to young viewers. Kubrick died in March. It is hard to believe he would have accepted the digital hocus pocus. Eyes Wide Shut should have been released as he made it, either unrated or NC-17. For adult audiences, it creates a mesmerizing daydream of sexual fantasy. The final scene in the toy store strikes me as conventional moralizing, an obligatory happy resolution of all problems, but the deep mystery of the film remains. To begin with, can Dr. Like Bill believe Victor's version of the events of the past few days? I would have enjoyed a final shot in a hospital corridor with Dr. Bill doing a double take as a gurney wheels past carrying the corpse of the piano player. The first, near the beginning, is at a black tie party where Tom Cruise's Dr. William Harford gets his pal Eagler Cindy Pollack out of a sticky situation with a naked girl in a drug coma. The second is near the end, where a pool playing Z. Eagler explains or seems to the fate of an anonymous woman who sacrificed herself for Harford when he was caught trespassing at a private org. Otherwise, the film strictly follows Schnittler's curve. Harford is a man so jealous of a phantom man and naval officer. His wife, Alice Nicole Kidman, confesses she was once passingly captivated by that he can't go home again until he has committed some sort of sexual or revenge. But Cruise's Harford is an ineffective sexual adventurer presented with a queue of obliging fantasy women and needy patient's daughter, a nice prostitute, an underage shopkeeper's daughter, a perfect-bodied masked whore. He falters at consummation every time. While Alice mutters orgasmically to the pillow slips at home, Harford is cold and faithful. His revenge remains uneaten. Given that the new scenes stress his close male friendship with Ziegler, one wonders what became of Raphael's take on Kubrick's theme in his book Eyes Wide Open. What Kubrick wants is the naked woman at the refrigerator door as she remembers to put the chicken away before she goes to a bed. Eyes Wide Shut certainly starts with a bare-assed Kidman getting dressed. And the best example of what Raphael means comes shortly after. When Kidman's Alice is sitting on the toilet in her party frock, she flushes the toilet and asks Harford, "How do I look? Great," he answers without turning around. The viewer is meant to enjoy the witty combination of female allure and domestic banality. Though Harford does not, he will only see Alice sexualized as another's lover. That ironic split between Harford's viewpoint and ours also applies to the way we see the other women as they make themselves available to him. So while Harford's moral property, his ethical foreign policy, seems admirable, we the voyeurs are assumed not to be party to it. A couple of suspicions are roused. Is it that Kubrick's mordant humor can't resist a dig in the ribs every time we see a naked woman? Or is he visiting implicit judgment on current inferior moral standards? Neither feels right. Kubrick's films are famed for their distance but intimate point of view. But here the viewers is set dead against the protagonist from the start. Something of a radical move and one that eventually proves a decisive. The casting of Cruise and Kidman complicates matters. It helps the balance of the film that Kidman rarely present on screen after the opening half hour gives the more raw and powerful performance, while the permanently on-screen Cruise remains on a cruise control, enhancing the film's a dream logic with his passivity. But it is Cruise who has the burden of the dream. He tries to bring the intensity he won in Born on the 4th of Juliet to it, staring and shaking his head in all disbelief. Latte, but too near the surface is the keen boy charmer just itching to show us his somersault. And there's no physical disability here to make that eagerness poignant. While the public face of this real-life couple lends itself to the fictional New York merry-eyeds and makes at least their routine togetherness feel natural, it likewise deepens the gulf between what we in Harford are supposed to be feeling when we see the Samia things. As soon as Harford leaves home to visit a grieving girl's first opportunity to cheat on Alice, Raphael's eroticism of monogamy theme is discarded. We are then forced to mimic Harford's fierce gaze as he surveys further heterosexual options to his marriage. It's only then that Kubrick's strategy becomes clear. We, the viewers, experience Harford's will he Won't he dilemma as if we were wearing him as a mask? Our status as real spectators to Harford's palette? Misfortune has no cathartic dimension. In that sense, Eyes Wide Shut feels like a 70s Boo, a tilde plus minus, so film depending for its stranges on enigmatic behavior in formal surroundings. The film is resolutely old-fashioned whenever illicit sexual contact begins, just as the deliberately cliched dialogue between Alice and a Hungarian seducer at Ziegler's party reminds one irresistibly of the Ferrero Rocher adverts. So the mask Andro Borgi, with its ponderous gothic touches and echoes of Fat Wire Do, feels like a solid throwback to the more innocent times of Hammer Horror or Roger Corman's Poeia movies. The problem with setting such an orgy in modern New York is that contemporary audiences know what sexual extremes are really on offer there, and how tame by comparison are the sculptural entanglements on offer here. Against this fact, we have the commercial reality of a Cruise and Kidman movie needing an AR rating in the U.S., which has forced digital concealment of sexual thrusting in a USA release prints of a Stanley Kubrick movie. Yet there's more to the dated feel of this movie than its griction on the cross of movie business double standards. Not only does it look visually modest in the age of The Matrix, a first for a Kubrick film, it's also dated in its fidelity to the mid-century ideal of the European art movie. Such a work, it assumes, should have a painstaking exposition that requires intellectual engagement by the audience. A few people's idea of a Tom Cruise movie. The path through its philosophical maze concerns the destructive nature of truth-telling between intimates. My guess is that the phrase Eyes Wide Shut is shorthand for the most successful attitude a monogamous couple can adopt to viewing each other's inner life. However, the trail keeps disappearing, lost to a more sweeping concern about the nature of our responsibility to all other humans for their safety at a doctor's dilemma. And Kubrick was, of course, a doctor's son. Suppose, then, we presume that Stanley Kubrick was a little out of touch at the end of his life, and that his need to shoot New York in England found him sleepifying the bustling metropolis, making it more fuzzily soft like dream stories. Vienna, perhaps he was dreaming of skating in Earl's dizzying on the butt. Tracks another Schnittler tale and didn't care so much where he was meant to be. Or perhaps Raphael is just too fussy a writer. The final film from Stanley Kubrick came 12 years after his previous picture, Full Metal Jacket. The expectations are high, and close friends and family of the director have said he really felt the pressure of making a great film because of the standards he'd set for himself. I never had the privilege of going to a new Kubrick film in the theater. I was 18 when Eyes Wide Shut was released and hadn't yet fully developed in my understanding of cinema. From what I read from older film fans, critics, a Kubrick movie was met with humming anticipation. These heightened expectations will inevitably lead to disappointment because they put so much of the viewer's demands on what the piece of art should be. However, contemporary reevaluations of Eyes Wide Shut have redeemed a beautiful send-off for one of our great masters in the craft, Dr. Bill. And Alice Harford, Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman are New York City residents who live comfortably in Manhattan. They attend a Christmas party at the home of one of Bill's wealthy patients, Victor Ziegler, Sidney Pollack. During the party, an older man tries to seduce Alice while Bill attends to a woman having a drug overdose whom Victor slipped upstairs to have sex with. Later that night, the couple put their daughter to bed and smoke a joint, which leads to a heated conversation about sexuality and temptation. Alice reveals that she went to the very edge of going to bed with a stranger she saw in a hotel once and even thinks about the man when she has sex with Bill. Bill is taken aback as he carried the view that it was men who are inherently sexually aggressive and women are rewarded for indulging men. 8. Their evening is interrupted by a call that one of Bill's colleagues has passed away, and so he goes over to console the family. This excursion into the night leads to a dreamlike odyssey through the streets of the city. Bill meets a host of odd people and familiar faces eventually leading him to a party at a manor outside of New York City. The attendants are masked and everything has an air of the occult. Guests participating in anonymous public sex and orgies with each other. Bill's paranoia increases after he leaves the party, finding himself unable to trust the world around him and unable to stop imagining his wife with that stranger from years ago. Eyes Wide Shut was released after Kubrick died, and he never got to edit the final cut of the project. The film was finished as close to his specifications as possible. But we have a Kubrick film, the only one other than Spartacus, where the editing was out of his hands. The picture was marketed and subsequently misinterpreted as an erotic thriller by critics, leading to a lot of confusion. If you look at the movies that fell into the category in the 1990s, Eyes Wide Shut did not fit that definition and was about much more profound themes than those films. Classifying Kubrick movies to a specific genre is near impossible because he blends so much in a single production or outright defies the genre. Expectations. I enjoy one critic's view that 2001 is not science fiction. Instead, it's science inevitability. Eyes Wide Shut, therefore, is an erotic allegory with its impressionistic plot structure and themes. The masks worn at the party are a clue to what Kubrick was saying about sexual relationships in both contemporary societies and over the ages. These are traditional Venetian-style masks and have a history of being used in anonymous sexual activities. There is also a strand of Catholicism in the opening ritual when Bill enters the mansion. There's a blending of elements of the church and mercantilism of sexuality. The women in the inner circle are blessed by the red chi, cloaked priest, and then exit to choose which person they will engage with. Only the wealthy elite are allowed into this and party, so you necessarily have to pay to play. We should also not forget this is the second part eye we see in the movie, with the first occurring when Bill and Alice go to Victor's. Later, Victor reveals he was at the masked party, the dark parallel to his own. Masks appear throughout the picture and serve as the main thematic element. When paired with the early argument between Bill and Alice, we can see that Kubrick explores the facades used in society and interpersonal relationships to keep things functional. Dreams are also a significant element in the work with the final line of the picture. And no dream is ever broken, bar just a dream spoken by Alice to Bill as he looks to her for advice on what happens next in their marriage. The entire plot grows from Alice's revelation that she dreams of sex with other men. Once Bill leaves the house, he engages in a series of surreal encounters. The daughter of his dead colleague suddenly kissing Bill and declaring her love without really knowing him, just happening to run across his old school pal Nick Nightingale at a jazz club where he is performing, crossing the street, only to end up being solicited by a stunningly beautiful prostitute to come back to her place. The bizarre encounter in the costume shop, and then the masked party and its subsequent fallout. During the movie, Kubrick does not hide rear projection and obviously constructed backlot facsimiles of New York City streets. This artifice is intentional because we need to disassociate from the literal and move into a sphere of the psychological. It attributes to the sense of the uncanny that something is off about this whole world. Release. Warner Brothers heavily promoted Eyes Wide Shut while following Kubrick's secrecy campaign, to the point that the film suppressed Kitsa contained no production notes, not even the director's suggestions to Semele regarding the marketing campaign given 1 week prior to Kubrick's death. The first footage was shown to theater owners attending the 1999 AO West, a convention in Las Vegas. TV spots featured both Asak and Lee Jat's music from the soundtrack while revealing little about the movie's plot. The film also appeared on the cover of Fatimea magazine and on Show Business. Programs such Asa Entertainment Tonight and Access Hollywood box office size-wide. Shooter opened on July 16, 1999 in the United States. The film topped the weekend box office with $121.7 million from 2,411 screens. 80's number surpassed the studio's expectations of $1.28 million and became both Cruise's sixth consecutive chart topper and Kubri's highest opening weekend, as well as the highest featuring Kidman and Cruise together. Eyes Wide Shut ended up grossing a total of $55,690,000 in the U.S. The numbers put it as Kubrick's second highest grossing film in the country, behind a 2001 A Space Odyssey. But both were considered a box office disappointment. Shortly after its screening at the Venice Film Festival, Eyes Wide Shut had a British premiere on September 3rd, 1999 at Thea Warner Village Cinema Enter Square. The film's wide opening occurred the following weekend and topped the UK charts with a pound 1,189A 672. The international performances for Eyes Wide Shut were more positive, with Kubri's longtime assistant and brother-in-law Jan Harlana stating that it was badly received in the Anglo-Saxon world, but it was very well received in the Latin world and Japan. In Italy, it was a huge hit. Overseas earnings of over $15 million led to a $162.91.28 box office run worldwide, turning it into the highest-grossing Kubrick film. Home media Eyes Wide Shut was first released in NAVSA and on March 7, 2000. The original DVD release corrects technical gaffes, including the reflected crew member and altering a piece of Alice Harford's dialogue. Most home videos remove the verse that was claimed to be cited from the sacred Hindu scripture bag of Adget Gita, although it was Pook's reworking of backwards priests, as stated above. In the UK, a Warner Home Videos rated 18, no video altering. 1999 DVD release was in 4:3 full-frame aspect ratio, with a note at the beginning that this was as Kubrick intended it to be shown ratio as shot. However, the film's length on this UK DVD is only 153 minutes as opposed to the 159 minutes of other available DVD and Blu-ray versions. This is due to the transfer being done at 25 frames per second rather than 24 as shot. No actual footage was cut. On October 23, 2007, Warner released it as Wide Shut in a special edition DVD, plus the HD, DVD, and Blu-ray disc formats. This is the first home video release that presents the film in anamorphic 1.78:1, 16:9 format. The film was shown theatrically as soft-matted 1.661, Europe 1.851 in the US and Japan. The previous DVD release used a 1.33:143 aspect ratio. It's also the first American home video release to feature the uncut version. Although the earliest American DVD of the uncut version states on the cover that it includes both the R-rated and unrated editions, in actuality only the unrated edition is on the DVD and the Criterion Collection, and will release the film in all 4 and Blu-ray in November of 2025. Reception back Eyes Wide Shut received generally positive reviews from critics and our Rotten Tomatoes. The film holds an approval rating of 76% based on 160 reviews with an average rating of 7/5/10. The website's critical consensus reads, Kubrick's intense study of the human psyche yields an impressive cinematic work. Metacritic gives the film a weighted of a score of 69 out of 100 based on 34 reviews indicating generally favorable reviews. Over 50 critics listed the film among the best of 1999. A French magazine hires Dus in a tilde, copyright man, named it the best film of the year in its annual top 10 list. However, audiences pled by Aseniscaria gave the film an average grade of D on an A+ to F scale. In the Chicago Tribune, Michael Wilmington declared the film a masterpiece, lauding it as provocatively conceived, gorgeously shot, and masterfully executed. Kubrick's brilliantly choreographed one-take scenes create a near-hypnotic atmosphere of desire and dread. Nathan Rabina Oava was also highly positive, arguing that the film's primal, almost religious intensity and power is primarily derived from its multifaceted realization that disobeying the dictates of society and your conscience can be both terrifying and exhilarating. The film's depiction of sexual depravity and immorality could easily venture into the realm of camp in the hands of a lesser filmmaker. But Kubrick depicts primal evil in a way that somehow makes it seem both new and deeply terrifying. Roger Edberta of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film a score of 3.5 stars out of 4, writing, "Kubrick's great achievement in the film is to find and hold an odd, unsettling, sometimes erotic tone for the Doctor's strange encounters." He praised the individual dreamlike atmosphere of the separate scenes and called the choice of Christmas-themed lighting garish, like an urban sideshow, reviewer James Berard. Noya stated that it was arguably one of Kubrick's best films, along with considering Kidman consistently excellent. He wrote that Kubrick has something to say about the causes and effects of depersonalized sex and praised the work as thought-provoking and unsettling. Writing for the New York Times, Times reviewer Janet Messina commented, "This is a dead serious film about sexual yearnings, one that flirts with ridicule, yet sustains its fundamental eeriness and gravity throughout. The dreamlike intensity of previous Kubrick visions is in full force here." Some reviewers were unfavorable. One complaint was that the movie's pacing was too slow. While this may have been intended to convey a dream state, critics objected that it made actions and decisions seem labor. Another complaint was that it did not live up to the expectation of it being a sexy film, which is what it had been marketed as, thus defying audience expectations. Many critics, such as Darizo Weekly, found the prolific orgies seemed to be banal and surprisingly tame. Walk pictorial talents were described as striking by Andre of the New York Post. The pivotal scene was deemed by a Stephen Hunter, writing for the Washington Post, as the dullest orgy he'd ever seen. Hunter elaborates on his criticism and states that Kubrick is annoyingly offhand, while at the same time grindingly pedantic plot points are made over and over again. Things are explained till the dawn threatens to break in the east, and the movie stumbles along at a glacial pace. Owen Gleiber, Monoff Entertainment. Weekly complained about the inauthenticity of the New York setting, claiming that the soundstage used for the film's production didn't have enough bustle to capture the reality of New York. Paul Detra of Fatna described the film as a slow-motion morality tale full of hot female bodies and thoroughly uneventful mystery. Willie Andrew. Sarisa, writing for the New York Observer, criticized the film's feeble attempts at melodramatic tension and suspense. David Owasa dismissed it as estranged from any period I recognize, who are these people played by Cruise and Kimmon, who act as if no one has ever made a pass at them and are so deeply traumatized by their newfound knowledge of sexual fantasy as the kind that mainstream culture absorbed at least half a century ago. Who are these aristocrats whose limos take them to secret masked orgies in Long Island? Mansions? Even dream plays need some grounding in the real world. A.J. Hobanda wrote that the film feels like a rough draft at best. Lee Juloff Roma Harper felt that most critics responded mainly to the marketing campaign and did not address the film on its own terms. Others felt that American censorship took an esoteric film and made it even harder to understand. In his article, Grotesque Caricature, published in A Postmodern Culture, Sten Matusuk praises the film's nuanced caricatured elements and states that the film's negation of conventional narrative elements is what resulted in its subsequent negative reception for the introduction to Michelle cements the Kubrick the definitive edition. A Martin Scorsese wrote, "When I Wide Shoota came out a few months after Stanley Kubrick's death in 1999, it was severely misunderstood, which came as no surprise if you go back and look at the contemporary reactions to any Kubrick picture. Except the earliest ones, you'll see that all his films were initially misunderstood. Then after 5 or 10 years came the realization that a 2001 or a Barry Lyndon or The Shining was like nothing else before or since. In 2012, Slant magazine ranked the film as the second greatest of the 1990s. Thea British Film Institute ranked the film at number 19 on its list of 90 great films of the 1990s. In 2022, renamed the film the best movie of the 1990s. The film was listed at number 61 in the BBC's list of the 100 greatest American films of all time. Controversies, though Warner Brothers insisted that Kubrick had turned in his final cut before his death, the film was still in the final stages of post-production, which was therefore completed by the studio in collaboration with Kubrick's estate. Some have argued that the work that remained was minor and exclusively technical in nature, allowing the estate to faithfully complete the film based on the director's notes. However, decisions regarding sound mixing, scoring, and color correction would have necessarily been made without Kubrick's input. Furthermore, Kubrick had a history of continuing to edit his films up until the last minute, and in some cases even after initial public screenings, as had been the case with the 2001 A Space Odyssey and The Shining writing for a Vanity Fair. Kubrick collaborate Hall Michael recalled a phone call from the director regarding the cut that would be screened for the Warner Brothers executives 4 days before his death. There was looping to be done, and the music wasn't finished. Lots of small technical fixes on color and sound. Would I show work that wasn't finished? He had to show it to Tom and Nicole because they had to sign nudity. Releases into Terry Semel and Bob Daly of Warner Brothers, but he hated it that he had to. And I could hear it in his voice that he did. Garrett Brown, inventor of the Austesicum, has expressed that he considers A Eyes Wide Shoot to be an unfinished film. I think A Eyes Wide Shooter was snatched up by the studio when Stanley died, and they just grabbed the highest number of ID to edit and ran off as if that was the movie. But it was 3 months before the movie was due to be released. I don't think there's a chance that was the movie he had in mind, or the music track and a lot of other things. It's a great shame because, it's out there, but it doesn't feel to me as it's really his film. Nicole Kidman, one of the stars of the film, briefly wrote about the completion of the film and the release of the film being at the same time owing John F. Kennedy Jr.'s death. From her perspective, there was a lot of interesting Eyes Wide Shoot before it was released. But the weekend it came out, July 16, 1999, was the death of JFK Jr., his wife, and her sister, a black weekend. And for Stanley to have died on March 7th, 1999, at age 70, before the film opened, well, it all felt so dark and strange. Stanley had sent over the cut he considered done to us. Tom and I watched it in New York, and then he died. Kubrick's opinion. Jan Harlan, Kubrick's brother-in-law and executive producer, reported that Kubrick was very happy with the film and considered it to be his greatest contribution to the art of cinema. R. Lee Hermey, an actor in Kubrick's film A Full Metal Jacket, stated that Kubrick phoned him 2 weeks before his death to express his despondency over Eyes Wide Shut. He told me it was a piece of Hermey said in a rat magazine and that he was disgusted with it and that the critics were going to have him for lunch. He said Cruise and Kidman had their way with him, exactly the words he used. According to a Todd Field, Kubrick's friend and an actor, Ana Eyes Wide Shut, her claims do not accurately reflect Kubrick's essential attitude. Field's response appeared in an October 18, 2006 interview with Grouch Reviews. The polite thing would be to say no comment, but the truth is that, let's put it this way, you've never seen two actors more completely subservient and prostrate themselves at the feet of a director. Stanley was absolutely thrilled with the film. He was still working on the film when he died, and he probably died because he finally relaxed. It was one of the happiest weekends of his life, right before he died after he had shown the hot first cut to Terry, Tom, and Nicole. He would have kept working on it like he did on all of his films. But I know that from people around him personally, my partner, who was his assistant for 30 years, and I thought about a RLI of In the Bedroom, and I talked to Stanley a lot about that film, and all I can say is Stanley was adamant that I shouldn't work with him for all kinds of reasons that I won't get into, because there is no reason to do that to anyone, even if they are saying slanderous things that I know are completely untrue. Studio censorship and classification, citing contractual obligations to deliver an R rating. Warner Brothers digitally altered the orgy for the film's American release by ad-blocking out a graphic sexuality using additional figures to obscure the view in order to avoid an adults N70A rating that would have limited its financial viability. This alteration antagonizes both film critics and Cinephiles A, who argued that Kubrick had never been shy about ratings. A Clockwork or a NASA originally given an X rating. The unrated version of FA's Wide Shooter was released in the United States on October 23, 2007 in a DVD, AHD, VA, and a Blu-ray of formats. Roger Roberta heavily criticized the technique of using digital images to mask the action. In his positive review of the film, he said it should not have been done at all, and it is symbolic of the moral hypocrisy of the rating system that it would force a great director to compromise his vision while by the same process making his adult film more accessible to young viewers. Although Ebert has been frequently cited as calling the standard North American R-rated version the Austin Powers version of Fi's Wide Shoot, a referring to two-scene Xena Austin Powers International Man of Mysteria, in which through camera angles and coincidences, full frontal nudity is blocked from view in a comical Y, as reviews stated that this joke referred to an early rough draft of the altered scene never publicly released. My first memories of Fi's Wide Shutto were not the fondest, even though I had seen many of Kubrick's other films, all of which then I loved. Prior to watching his swan song for my first time, I did not like it very much. Although over the years, much talk upon looking back at many of Stanley Kubrick's other films has considerably made my opinion of Fi's Wide Shoe to grow favorably. Suddenly I realized on another viewing that perhaps I may have misunderstood what was Stanley Kubrick's intention behind such an odd film, and eventually I grew to the conclusion that Eyes Wide Shut truly is one of the finest swan songs of all time. From the casting alone, it is clear that Kubrick is trying to draw a parallel between performance art and marriage, when it is put into consideration that at the time Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman were married to one another. They play a husband and wife in here, and both ends are fueled by betrayal, which sets off the tone for Eyes Wide Shut, Nicole. Kidman's Alice Hartford has cheated on Tom Cruise's Bill Hartford, which sets the New York doctor on a quest with an obsession for a sexual desire on his mind. It is clear from the casting of Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman against one another that Kubrick was obsessed with the imperfections within marriage, and what happens upon a discovery that may damage a relationship greatly. At the time, Eyes Wide Shooter was not the subject of unanimous praise, but instead heavy criticism. One of many complaints from then was the fact that because the film was badly marketed to look much like an erotic thriller, Eyes Wide Shut is extremely far away from erotic, even with the heavy usage of sexuality coming onto the screen and all the nudity that is being exposed. The lack of eroticism, even to the sex scenes, is a part of what make Eyes Wide Shut all the more fascinating experience, as instead of evoking eroticism, there's an eeriness arising because it brings viewers closer to an idea of how strongly the sexual fantasies of one individual end up alienating them from Thea outside. It's also worth noting how the soundtrack, which is filled with very many romantic songs, is especially contradictory to what is presented on the screen. The romantic songs are to provoke a form of excitement, which is a feeling that is fueled by sexuality. It is clear, right? From his provocation of the viewer's desire for eroticism, like the marketing may have promised, that there is a certain desire within the head that he is condemning from the viewers. These sexual desires running through the head, the Eyes Wide Shut had promised, provide a setup for something more uncomfortable because there's a hint to a sense of danger coming. The way of Cruise's Bill Hartford looking at Eyes Wide Shut from its exterior. There's a theme of misogyny running along that adds more to what forms such a haunting experience. The misogyny running through Eyes Wide Shut adds more to the film's commentary on the higher class and their privileges. We know already that thanks to his job, Bill Hartford is a wealthy man. Alice, from the confession that she has fantasized about finding sexual pleasures with other men, is already the clue that she is only around as a means of providing desires for men. Bill remains faithful to his wife, even though all of these women around him within this fantasy are clearly giving him opportunities to feed his sexual desires, resisting interrupting the course of an author class. There's an interesting way to look at how Stanley Kubrick is presenting human qualities to characters who normally would be viewed as something of more significance because of their wealth. With the knowledge that Alice Hartford is carrying a goddess-like beauty to her own natural image, which starts up the film, the next instance in which we see her, she is on the toilet. Even with her affiliation with the wealthy Dr. Bill Hartford, we get an image that they are no different a species from us. They are still human, and they are fueled by desire. It seems as if he has gotten as close as he possibly could to what runs on their mind through all the erotic imagery he presents here. Eyes Wide. Shuta is not a film that will prove itself within a single viewing because it is a very troubling one to think about and pinpoint every last detail that forms a deeply layered fantasy unlike any other. Every time in which I come back to Eyes Wide Shut, I always feel as if there is always something new to pick out from what it is presenting. It may indeed be Stanley Kubrick's most intimate understanding of the human psychology to date, and for what it has managed to accomplish, it is an exceptional final note to the career of an artist like he. Even if we may see The Shining as one of the greatest horror films ever made, I see his swan song, Eyes Wide Shut, to be Kubrick's most frightening film for its exposure of the truth behind what fuels the human desires. Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut is like an erotic daydream about chances missed and opportunities avoided. For its hero, who spends 2 nights wandering in the sexual underworld, it's all foreplay. He never actually has sex, but he dances close and holds his hand in the flame. Why does he do this? The easy answer is that his wife has made him jealous. Another possibility is that the story she tells inflames his rather torpid imagination. The film has the structure of a thriller with the possibility that conspiracies and murders have taken place. It also resembles a nightmare, a series of strange characters drifting in and out of focus, puzzling the hero with unexplained details of their lives. The reconciliation at the end of the film is the one scene that doesn't work. A film that intrigues us because of its loose ends shouldn't try to tidy up. Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman as Dr. Bill and Alice Hartford, a married couple who move in rich Manhattan society. In a long, languorous opening sequence, they attend a society ball where a tall Hungarian, a parody of a suave seducer, tries to honey-talk Alice. Did you ever read the Latin poet of it on the art of love? Meanwhile, Bill gets a come-on from 2 aggressive women before being called to the upstairs bathroom where Victor Cindy Pollack, the millionaire who is giving the party, has an overdosed hooker who needs a doctor's help. At the party, Bill meets an old friend from medical school, now a pianist. The next night at home, Alice and Bill get stoned on pot, apparently very good pot, considering how Zach they seem. And she describes a fantasy she had about a young naval officer she saw last summer while she and Bill were vacationing on Cape Cod. At no time was he ever out of my mind, and I thought, if he wanted me only for one night, I was ready to give up everything a broken bar. There is a fight. Bill leaves the bike house and wanders the streets, his mind inflamed by images of Alice making love with the officer, and now begins his long adventure, which has parallels with Joyce's Ulysses in Nighttown and Scorsese After Hours as one sexual situation after another swims into view. The film has 2 running jokes, both quiet ones. Almost everyone who sees Bill, both male and female, reacts to him sexually, and he is forever identifying himself as a doctor, as if to reassure himself that he exists at it. Kubrick's great achievement in the film is to find and hold an odd, unsettling, sometimes erotic tone for the doctor's strange encounters, shooting in a grainy high-contrast style, using lots of backlighting under lighting and strong primary colors, setting the film at Christmas to take advantage of the holiday lights. He makes it all a little garish, like an urban sideshow. Dr. Bill is not really the protagonist, but the acted upon, careening from one situation to another. Out of his depth, Kubrick pays special attention to each individual scene. He makes a deliberate choice, I think not, to roll them together into an ongoing story, but to make each one a destination, to give each encounter the intensity of a dream in which this moment is clear, but it's hard to remember where we've come from or guess what comes next. The film pays extraordinary attention to the supporting actors, even cheating camera angles to give them the emphasis on two shots in several scenes. Cruise is like the straight man. Sidney Pollack is the key supporting player as a confident, sinister man of the world living in old-style luxury, deep-voiced experience. Decadent Dua Todd Field plays Nick, the society piano player who sets up Bill's visit to a secret orgy. And there is also a wonderful role for Avina Shawa as a hooker who picks up Dr. Bill and shares some surprisingly sweet time with him. The movie's funniest scene takes place in a hotel where Bill questions a desk clerk played by Alan as a cheerful queen who makes it pretty clear he's interested. Araid Shadia, a gravel-voiced bearded patriarch, plays a costume dealer who may also be retelling the favors of his young daughter. Carmela Marner is a waitress who seems to have learned her trade by watching sitcoms. And a Marie Richardson Sona is the daughter of a dead man who wants to seduce Dr. Bill almost literally on her father's deathbed. All of these scenes have their own focus and intensity. Each sequence has its own dramatic arc. They all lead up to and away from the extraordinary orgy sequence in a state where Dr. Bill Gate crashes and wanders among scenes of, say, the sexual ritual and writings worthy of Bosch. The masked figure who rules over the proceedings has ominous presence, as does the masked woman who warns Dr. Bill he is in danger. This sequence has hypnotic intensity. The orgy, alas, has famously undergone digital alterations to obscure some of the more energetic rumpy-pumpy. A shame. The events in question are seen at a certain distance without visible genitalia and are more atmosphere than action. But to get the R rating, the studio has had to block them with digitally generated figures, two nude women arm in arm, and some cloaked men. In rough draft form, this masking evoked Austin Powers' famous genital hide-and-seek sequence. I have now seen the polished version of the technique, and will say it is done well, even though it should not have been done at all. The joke is that Eyes Wide Shut is an adult film in every atom of its being, with or without those digital effects. It is inappropriate for younger viewers. It's symbolic of the moral hypocrisy of the rating system that it would force a great director to compromise his vision while by the same process making his adult film more accessible to young viewers. Kubrick died in March. It is hard to believe he would have accepted the digital hocus pocus. Eyes Wide Shut should have been released as he made it. Either unrated or NC-17 for adult audiences, it creates a mesmerizing daydream of sexual fantasy. The final scene in the toy store strikes me as conventional moralizing and obligatory happy resolution of all problems. But the deep mystery of the film remains. To begin with, can Dr. Bill believe Victor's version of the events of the past few days? I would have enjoyed a final shot in a hospital corridor with Dr. Bill doing a double take as a gurney wheels past carrying the corpse of the piano player. If being a cinephile is a form of addiction, and it often feels like it is, then the films of Stanley Kubrick are at skate-away drugs. Not Kubrick alone, granted, but there are a clutch of great directors whose work is easily available, who open up the doors. Years down the road, my favorite hotels have changed, and I find I have greater admiration for subtlety. But for signature boldness, exacting aesthetics, and career-spanning technical prowess, Kubrick is one hell of a bong hit. Eyes Wide Shut dizzied me on first approach all those years ago, watched on DVD. Those dreadful WB cardboard clip cassettes a broken bar because I was just a little too young to actually see it on initial release. I remember being struck by its altogether different approach to the subject of sex, which Hollywood had mostly presented to me as a kind of steamy MS advert, or the tipping point at which melodrama slid down into entropy, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was that made it special. I may have watched that DVD of FA's Wide Shoot upwards of 10 times over the years, but seeing it on a cinema screen after all this time, in a space where I've seen so many contemporary films, made it feel bigger. Not just in terms of the literal dimensions of the space, even having never seen it in the theater before, I felt nostalgic for something I'd never really been a part of. A vision of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and finally 90s, when a film as gigantic as one of Kubrick would be thrust into cinemas, daring you to decide what to do with it. Eyes Wide Shooter received something of a perplexed reception from critics, most still reeling from the director's then recent demise. It was as though the expectations that came with the film high already had been loaded, that it now had to fulfill some career-capping mandate that its maker had never. In truth, most Kubrick films received rocky reviews on release. There's just so much to chisel out of them. Ba has taken perhaps the longest to earn its place in his canon. Maybe it's the subject matter. Sex and fidelity have always been approached by Hollywood with either a blush or a at. The other end of the spectrum, in a rush to sensationalize is a strange creature. It discusses these things from a more intellectual vantage, poking into what constitutes infidelity, what drives jealousy, and how monogamous couples sustain themselves through shared truths and shared deceptions. So far, so clinical is to be expected from Kubrick. But that other side of him is here too. The side that gave us that shot of Malcolm McDowena, a clockwork, or Angia, reaching up toward a pair of melon-like boobs with giddy abandon, the Benny Hill-loving Kubrick Anna, as it's there in a near comic enthusiasm for female nudity, the OTT orgy sequences, and his rather stiff and bumbling approach to homosexuality, something he clearly wanted to include but still seems to snigger at. Over the years, I've heard a theory that none of the things Dr. William Harford, Tom Cruise, experiences on his odysseys through New York are actually happening. That, like the fantasies his wife Alice, Nicole Kidman, has of the once glimpsed Navy officer, his near infidelities are all just imaginings. I'd kind of discredited it, but on this viewing it suddenly bloomed into an interesting and quite viable hockey. But for the fact of the mask on the pillow, it works. Most of Doctor for Bill's near-miss decretions, and with a sharp cut back to him, either walking the streets or sitting in a taxi. As though quickly done with the fantasy, he snaps back to his dull reality. If you allow for his 2 excursions to rainbow fashions to be real, then it's a credible way to view the film. It even speaks to a level of reticence or impotence in Bill juxtaposed with Alice. His fantasies amount to an elaborate series of close calls, or read another way, a problem with finishing too quickly. A broken bar, hers, meanwhile, ruthlessly provide gratification. Kubrick the film with a whole host of different sexual desires and obsessions for built up to ponder sex with prostitutes, underage girls, pedophilia, a broken bar, even corpses, that Marenia, a broken bar. Getting all of these and more into one film is a logistical nightmare that could have exploded in his fascia, a broken bar, but he gets away with it all. This read also places the Diances of Bill and Alice in greater balance, although Bill suddenly seems quite mad, hiring a costume for no reason, and the only real inequality left is how much screen time Cruise gets over Kidman. The gaze is skewed to masculine, that's Kubrick's own perspective and reference point, But there's something wryly funny in how Kidman still outclasses a near-career best Cruise in every scene they share together. This viewing also reminded me of something I usually forget about which always makes me smile when it's presented to me. Hag ain't a broken bar. It is Christmassy but not without reason, a broken bar. It underscores what's at thread for Bill and Dallas: family, solidarity, security. This is my first Christmas film of the season. I'm including it. Festive as hell. Kubrick led me to Tarkovsky, led me to Kieslowski, led me to a broken bar. You get the idea. He's one of the first, one of the biggies. His boldness is something we rarely see in cinemas these days. That's neither good or bad. Like I say, there's something to be said for subtlety, but it does make these anniversary re-releases treat re-experience it. Several years ago, I recall reading an interview with British novelist P.D. James, the author of the Adam Dalglie's mystery series, in which she was asked why it took her an average of 3 to 4 years to write a new book when other writers working in her genre typically release something every 6 to 12 months. James' response was illuminating. She indicated that it wasn't the writing that consumed her time, but the effort of doing background research and preparation. The late director Stanley Kubrick, who died on March 7, 1999, would have understood and agreed with that assessment. Kubrick, the craftsman of more than a half-dozen genuine classics, including a Spartacus, a Dr. A Strange Love, a 2001 A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, and a Full Metal Jacket, was known for taking his time shepherding projects to the screen. Especially with his later films, he would not allow himself to be hurried. The gap between The Shining and A Full Metal Jacket was 7 years that widened to an even dozen between A Full Metal Jacket and Eyes Wide Shut, because Kubrick was a living legend during the time when he was macking Eyes Wide Shut. The project was placed under an inordinate amount of public scrutiny through every phase of its development: pre-production, filming, reshoots, editing, etc. Kubrick's insistence upon secrecy deepened the mystery surrounding the film. From time to time, tantalizing bits of information leaked out. Some of these rumors have since been disproved, while others, such as the dismissal and replacement of actors Harvey Keitel and Jennifer Jason Leigh, are a matter of the factual record. As a result of all the pre-release interest and speculation, no 1999 motion picture, except The Phantom Menace, has been greeted with this degree of anticipation. Eyes Wide Shut is Kubrick through and through, from the frequent long, unbroken takes to the camera's refusal to remain static. Kubrick's style, which became increasingly personalized with every new project, is one of Eyes Wide Shut's most recognizable traits. Every shot and camera angle was selected with great care. There were no happy accidents. Each moment of screen time was meticulously plotted, with many scenes being read on at a later date when the initial version did not meet with the director's approval. The time allotted for reshoots allegedly equal the period most movies demand for primary filming. The story, which deals with the various faces of sex and love, is adult in nature. The curtain rises on Doctor for Bill Harford, Tom Cruise, and his wife Alice, Nicole Kidman, as they prepare for a glamorous Christmas party given by one of Bill's friends, Victor Zagler, Sidney Pollack. Alice isn't happy about attending, and when her husband abandons her so he can chat with an old medical school buddy turned pianist Todd Field and flirt with a pair of models, she imbibes a few too. Many glasses of champagne. This makes her susceptible to the suave advances of a debonair party guest who suggests, "Don't you think that one of the charms of marriage is that it makes deception a necessity for both parties?" Alice eventually fends off this seduction, but it causes her to consider fidelity in marriage, both hers and her husband's. The next night, following a heated argument, Alice admits to Bill that she almost cheated on him once, and had the circumstances been slightly different, she would have thrown her entire life away for one night with the man she had lusted after. This revelation shatters the stability of Bill's world. He had been confident that no matter what, he could be sure of his wife's faithfulness. He leaves their home to visit a patient, but instead of coming straight back, he wanders the streets of New York. A series of chance encounters lead him on an unexpected path of discovery into a sexual underworld where he finds not only perversion and pleasure, but death and danger. Soon he is being followed and has reason to fear for his safety as well as that of his wife and his young daughter. Much has been written about the sexual content of Eyes Wide Shut, which is extreme but not excessive or pornographic in nature. Kubrick presents sex and nudity in a manner that is more disturbing than erotic. The underlying current of uncertainty and danger lends an unsettled aura to the most explicit scenes. The first time we see a nude woman, she is lying sprawled in a chair, having overdosed on drugs. Later, when Bill and Alice are engaging in foreplay, she is clearly abstracted. And during the soon-to-be infamous orgy sequence, all of the participants are masked and many are wearing sinister costumes that consist of hooded black capes and tuxedos. This entire portion of the film has a gothic feel to it. It's impossible to mention the orgy without discussing the digital manipulation demanded by the Pollack Eyes Wide shoot to have its classification reduced from the box office killing NC-17 to an R. Although Kubrick tentatively approved the concept of using digital figures to block out 65 seconds of certain sex acts, he might have balked at the final result. While the computer-generated images look adequate from a realism point of view, their placement is awkward and it becomes obvious that they were inserted to hide screen images. In calling the altered North American edition the Austin Powers subversion of FA's wide shooter, referring to the strategic placement of foreground images, film critic Roger Ebert hit the proverbial nail on the head. My dissatisfaction with this approach is reflected in my rating for the film. In many ways, AI's Wide Shooter is a 4-star movie, but with this glaring flaw intact, I cannot justify giving the version I saw my highest rating. The Kina Eyes Wide Shooter is one near and dear to Kubrick's heart, the dehumanization of society. This is a concept he has returned to repeatedly during his career, most obviously in a 2001 A Clockwork Orange and a Full Metal Jacket. Here Kubrick has something to say about the causes and want effects of depersonalized sex. The orgy scene is the fulcrum wide shut, and during its course, all of the copulating couples are masked and costumed. They cannot kiss, see each other's faces, and, for the most part, they do not speak. Sex is normally the most intimate means of human interaction. Yet here it is reduced to a ritualistic, almost creepy form of gratification. The men and women involved in this tableau must hide their faces because being recognized could cause them untold damage in the current social and political climate. There is freedom and anonymity, but also isolation and a complete dare of emotion. Throughout the entire film, Bill struggles with sexual issues. During the orgy, he is invited by more than one woman to participate before and afterwards. He has opportunities to abandon his marriage vows when propositioned by acquaintances and hookers. The way he reacts in each of these circumstances and the manner in which he interacts sexually with his wife displays a growing awareness concerning the ease of having a meaningless sex with someone who is regarded as an object and the difficulty of having a meaningless sex with someone who is seen as a person. In the end, depersonalization wins out. Carefully consider the wording of Alice's final statement and the context in which it is made. There are really only two performances that matter: Eyes Wide Shut, Cruise's and Kidman's, while other actors, Cindy Pollack, Todd Field, Marie Richardson, Vinessa Shaw, and Leela Sobeys, to name a few, make appearances. Their screen time is insignificant compared to that of the two leads. For his part, Cruise is solid but uneven. There are several scenes in which he turns in powerful work, but there are other instances when he seems to be forcing the performance on one or two occasions. I thought I was watching him reenact his work from a Jerry Maguire, which was fine for that movie, but is out of place in this one. Kidman, on the other hand, is consistently excellent. This is the most powerful role she has taken on throughout a varied career. The Musicina Eyes Wide Shooter is singularly effective. In fact, this may represent the best use of a soundtrack in any of Kubrick's films. Jocelyn Puck's compositions reinforce the tone of every scene in which they are employed. And while several of the pieces used here are lush orchestral numbers, such as the one by Pukus during the orgy, those that create the strongest impression are the simple discordant ones designed for the piano. Credited to composer Getto de Pilcro Gilly as John Carpenter proved in a Halloween, complexity is not always necessary to set the proper mood, and strange as it lies may seem elements of this score reminded me of a Halloween's, as is almost always. True in a Kubrick film, the director transports us into an alternate reality. Kubrick's productions are never grounded in our reality. His characters always fall into a skewed place and time in a Doctor Strangelove. It was a world where the Cold War had gone mad. In 2001, it was House's Domain in a Clockwork Orange. It was an Orwellian future in a Full Metal Jacket. Here, it's an underground realm of sex parties and orgies. The movie begins and ends in a familiar New York, but in between, the director uses all of the tools at his disposal to warp our accustomed world into something bizarre and surreal. Hi-Fi's Wide Shooter was to be placed into a genre. The label would be psychological thriller. Although such pigeonholing does a great disservice to the movie, the second half is characterized by building tension, and the suspense isn't completely dissipated when the truth is revealed. This is in part because Kubrick cleverly allows a kernel of doubt to remain about what really is going on. He presents two possibilities, and although the facts favor one resolution, it's never clear-cut. As usual, there are a series of unforgettable sequences. In addition to the orgy, there's Bill's strange and comical late-night trip to a costume store run by a suspicious fellow played by Ray Serbza. This involves cross-dressing and a hint of pedophilia. Another memorable moment occurs when Bill and Alice begin making love in front of a mirror. From a set design perspective, it's impossible to ignore the opulence of Victor's Christmas party, and there's a scene when Bill is being stalked through the silent, empty streets of New York. For those who view cinema as something more substantive than an evening's diversion, the release of F.A.'s Wide Shoot is an event, one more momentous than the unveiling of Father Phantom Menace. However, while George Lucas' latest venture into a galaxy far, far away left some fans feeling disappointed and betrayed, Stanley Kubrick's final directorial effort will reward a majority of his loyalists with a sense of satisfaction. In terms of power and effect, AI's Wide Shooter approaches but does not surpass Kubrick's vintage work. It is thought-provoking and unsettling. Impressions and images linger long after the projector has finished weaving its peculiar magic, making Eyes Wide Shut one of 1999's best offerings to date. Eyes Wide Shut, now on re-release, is fascinating, flawed laid-out Stanley Kubrick, his final film before his death in 1999 at the age of 70. It was adapted from Arthur Schnitzler's Trum novel or Dream Story, published in 1926 and originally set in Vienna. The film is a tale of sexual obsession among modern-day Manhattan's wealthy and powerful classes, and I originally valued it for its satirical potency, formal control, and dreamlike self-possession, all of which are bound up in a certain kind of deadpan absurdity and soft porn seriousness. Tom Cruise plays Bill Harford, a well-off New York doctor with a fashionable clientele and a magnificent apartment in Central Park West, happily married to beautiful Alice Nicole Kidman, a former art gallery director, now a stay-at-home mom, to their young daughter. In the book, they are Jewish, an important part of the doctor's alienation. Not here. Unsettled by each other's flirtatious behavior at a swell party given by a wealthy patient, Victor Ziegler, Cindy, Pollack, and by a consumption of champagne and weed. They later have a furious row in which Alice defiantly confesses her lustful thoughts for a certain other man in her past, and Bill then finds himself on a nighttime odyssey searching for extramarital adventure and gate-crashing a sinister mask tour which he gains admittance by, murmuring the ironic password Fidelia. This revival comes with a brief documentary short about the film Never Just a Dream, with interviewees including his longtime collaborator, executive producer, and brother-in-law Jan Harleen, but not his widow Christiane, and not his most important collaborator, a screenwriter, Frederick Raphael. It might be time to reissue I.A. Raphael's 1999 memoir of working with Kubrick, Eyes Wide Open, in which Raphael amusingly hints that the tense mood of Cruise's cab ride out to the creepy orgy mansion was inspired by his own mini cab journeys. from St. Albans railway station to the famed seclusion of Kubri's Hertfordshire country home for script. Discussions. The title Eyes Wide Shut was Kubri, and in my original piece I wondered whether it related to the idea of imaginary sexual transgression being as potent as real waking transgressions. In dreams, you see and know things clearly with your eyes wide shut. It's only now that I can see another comparison that was always under my nose, Malcolm McDowell's eyes being clipped wide open in A Clockwork Orange, being forced to watch something horrible. There are other visual echoes, such as the eerie emptiness of the elevator, lobbies like those in The Shining A, which are part of the film's artificiality and theatricality, mocked little by the film's denigrators at the time, but a part of the hallucinatory effect. Then there is the party scene at the beginning, like something from The Shining, where Alice meets her predatory Hungarian suitor, Sky Montana, who could almost be a ghost. Kubri's use of Stravinsky's waltz from his jazz suite shows his sweet tooth for mainstream classical music themes and his predilection for softcore female nudity. Is a characteristic thought a bit dated in 1999. Perhaps what we felt was contrived was that orgy scene. Although it is disquieting and strange in the Hammer horror way, it originally impressed me. But by 1999, a Bret Easton Ellis's American Psychoa had upped the ante on these ideas of Manhattan superwealth and depravity, and in comparison, Eyes Wide Shut seemed a tad quaint. Yet now in the age of Epstein, we can see that it was not so far-fetched to imagine elaborate clubs in which the rich and powerful can disport themselves and exploit the tough, vulnerable. What comes across even more strongly about Eyes Wide Shut now is its chilling emphasis on ruling class secrecy. This film inspired a Jonathan Glazer's Birth 2004 itself, underappreciated at the time. Cruise and Kidman heartfelt and fervent performances, although the flickering black and white moments showing her imagined sexual indulgence don't work. There are tears, and Cruise in particular lays himself open in that fiercely committed way that he tries everything as an actor. Did their actual marital disputes resemble what happened in this film? Maybe. They were divorced 2 years after this came out, with much gossip about whether the film had accentuated their discontents. Pollack's performance as Zagler is thrillingly cynical and disillusioned. Eyes Wide Shut is released in the UK on 29th of November. The whole film is Bill Pilgrim's progress meditation on marriage, honesty, and sex. By the time he and Alice reunite, they are both shaken to the core. The truth has been laid out clearly before them, but they do not know what to do next. While most of the picture consists of movement, the final scene has both our leads standing. Still, Bill promises Alice that they are both fully awake now and we be like this forever, to which she responds with a sense of fear. Is being fully transparent and awake with even your spouse a preferred state of being? Or do we need to recede into dreams from time to time? As with all good Kubrick pictures, we are left with a sense of ambiguity. The filmmaker doesn't know the answer, but he understands the philosophical importance of asking the question. We are left to contemplate what he asks. Is it better to be in a state of panic, yet moving or still in the face of complete, uncompromising truth? Being somewhat of a fan of the mighty and now very dead Stanley Kubrick, naturally I was excited at the prospect of a new movie, some 12 or 13 years after his last one, although I didn't realize it at the time. Most of his movies have this vaguely desolate character about them. People walk in and out of huge empty rooms, and they seem like tiny plastic figures. The noises of their footsteps are amplified and echoed to the outside world as if to emphasize their complete and utter disconnection from the scene itself. This particular framework was played out especially in 2001, A Space Odyssey, and The Shining. The main thematic backdrops to all of his movies was dislocation filtered, as it were, through this almond present, feeling that no matter how hard people tried, they would always misunderstand each other, and ultimately they would revert back to their per facto cocoon-like existence. He's invested this notion in all the genres. pseudo-political satire, Dr. Strangelove, science fiction, 2001, horror, The Shining, War, Full Metal Jacket, and whatever you want to call it, A, Clockwork Orange. So I was expecting to see Kubrician or Kubrick-esque dysfunction in the new Eyes Wide Shut, released a few weeks ago. Well, of course, it was dysfunctional. The characters who habitated this world were not upstanding representatives of family values, and Dan and Marilyn Quayle would not recommend this movie to their kids. At the same time, there was something vaguely conventional about the movie in a sort of upper-class New York way, like a Woody Allen movie, which never have black people, even though they're always in New York. That isn't funny. Kubrick's convention is decadent, but the completely over-the-top decadence of most of the principal characters of the movie make it the kind of conventional that conservative rich who go to parish fashion shows would like. Maybe that was the whole point of all this, to make these rich folks more distasteful than they really are. Casting Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman was either a stroke of genius. I mean, they are the quintessential rich, snooty Hollywood couple, or complete idiocy. How are we supposed to forget that Tom is probably reading Scientology booklets in between the takes of various orgies, etc.? There's no way you could call the movie not weird. It was very weird. Basically, some kind of meditation on the consequences of infidelity, both imagined and real. The woman imagines, the man tries to do it for real. Kubrick draws some kind of moral equivalence unwittingly or willingly, bolstering male-female stereotypes that women live with their fantasies and men don't. The most telling moment in the movie is a confrontation between the husband Cruise and the wife Kidman, in which the husband reveals his sexist notions that women don't really think about debauchery because they are just inherently more chaste, whereas men are just pigs. They'll fornicate with anything that moves to the shock of husband. Wife dispels that notion, laughing in husband's face. It's a powerful moment, skillfully done by Kubrick, and you think that the film will ultimately hinge around challenging husband's very traditional interpretation of the dynamic between men and women. Number Cubit just trots out a vast array of naked women, and I mean a vast array, whose only goal in their lonely New York existence is to be passive sexual objects for the very clothed men. No men are naked in this movie. Sure, women have sex, but not because they enjoy it, because they like to just hang around and please men and walk around naked. So, yeah, the movie was kind of ridiculous and kind of offensive. Some of the scenes are stunning and beautifully filmed. The music is excellent. The movement of the actors is well choreographed, but the movie is kind of sterile. And I mean that in a bad way, because ENA 2001 sterile was good. So Kubrick produced another weird movie to end his brilliant career, but it was the kind of weirdness that makes you think New Yorkers are boring. No earth-shattering observations about disconnection or alienation, and maybe that was his last very deliberate epitaph, that we can all be saved if we have sex. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.